Now, how is this different than what you're suggesting is different than, say, Timothy Leary or Terence McKenna?
Well, again, my focus is on the ironic scheme, the idea that these things were done as a form of controlling your slave populations. So again, Timothy Leary, for example, I really like a lot of his ideas, and I think he was may have been motivated for the right reasons. But again, I question where he came from. He's got a military background, and a lot of the people in the psychedelic community have a military background, and a lot of it goes back to the CIA. And even before that, there were secret societies in Austria with Rudolf Steiner. The whole thing with the whole LSD thing and all that, it's really interesting because a lot of the narrative is just bullshit. LSD and the knowledge of mushrooms have been around for hundreds of years and practiced in secret, and it's only slowly been released to us. And so the whole stuff in the 50s with Albert Hoffman and the bicycle ride, I think that's just bunk, is just total bullshit. So you get into like people like Timothy Leary, tune in, turn on, and drop out. Encouraging people to drop out of society and instead of becoming better people within it. Again, I think the 60s was probably an MK Ultra experiment where they did, and while I think drugs are great and LSD and mushrooms can be a medicine, they can also mess with your mind and they can destroy it. And if you don't have something there to replace it with or to guide you or structure, once that structure is removed with the psychedelic experience, if you don't have something in place, you can put anything in place of it. So, right. And you take somebody like Terence McKenna and his archaic revival, and he was really into these fairies and elves, and it's like, I can't take that shit seriously because they're molecules, and it's like I've done every psychedelic I could get my hands on, and I've never really interpreted it that way. And again, it's the Bible. If you do want to interpret entities from this experience, well, you have angels and demons, and I think the context of the Bible is far more superior than, again, trying to go back to some ancient, archaic revival, which was premised on slavery and human sacrifice. So I think there's, a better, more positive way in trying to, let's drop back into society and become better people, and then as better people, we'll make society better, because that's all society is.
Now let's just talk about how mushrooms work a little bit. Now, you mentioned in your book that mushrooms work like a pharmacon. Can you elaborate on that? What is a pharmacon?
Okay, this is kind of a complex idea, so I'll just go over it really briefly because it's something that we could talk about this for hours, and it's very, I don't want to say intellectual, but it's a criticism. It's a word that comes from the ancient Greek, and it means drug, but it implies that the drug is both a poison and a remedy, or the cure and the remedy. And related to this is another word is pharmakos, which means a ritual human sacrifice. So you think about if people, because people themselves, their discourse, what comes out of their mouth could work like a drug, say, for example, someone like Socrates or Jesus, their actual discourse, it works like a drug on society. Like you eat the drug, it changes the way that you think, and then, you start talking about what you're thinking, and then that'll go into somebody else's brain. In a lot of ways, you think of it as like a contact type high. Think about it my interpretation of the way that I take about this is that, people's ideas work like a drug, okay? And that, again, like the contact high. But, a better analogy, let me jump to this, is today, instead of the pharmacon, that's a very ancient idea, but the similar idea that I can make an analogy to is, let's say that an analogy would be like computer programs, okay? And we have these computer programs, and some of them are really awesome. They help us. They make our lives easier. And on the other hand, you have computer programs that are like viruses or malware. They actually they work in our brains, and they work in such a way as that they don't. They serve a purpose, but it's not to help us. It's actually like a virus on your computer can eventually, use your computer to do something for another person. It can connect it to a whole network of other what they call zombie bots, and then turn your computer into like a robot. And again, that's what a lot of these religious ideas and stuff do. They work like a virus on the mind, and they're able to turn people into like robots. When you think about what a church does, that's what they do. It's like you have a computer program and you have to get updated, and you go every week to go and they update the programming in you, and they can give you the newest, latest downloads. So as a pharmacon, you think about people and their voices. Again, like I think one of the great examples in our time of somebody like that would be somebody like Bob Dylan, and tying back into the psychedelic world, because Bob Dylan was very popular when he first came out as, say, a folk artist, but he really achieved lasting fame when he started taking acid, and he changed his music, and he totally influenced everybody. I mean, I mentioned earlier before that I was influenced by the Doors. And even though Jim Morrison's only a few years older than Bob Dylan, I really don't think the Doors would have ever existed without Bob Dylan's influence on music. And I think of all the other people who went and imitated Dylan. Again, he did one of the first people to take acid, and then it influenced his work. And you can go watch and listen to his interviews. You can see in his eyes that he's high on LSD when he's giving some of these interviews. It's just... But he's influencing people through that, and he's changing society as a result of it.
Now, is there a difference in mushrooms, say, between, you write about Amanita and psilocybin?
Yeah, there is a difference, and they're very fascinating because the Amanitas, they contain ibotenic acid, and the ibotenic acid it's a neurotoxin. It's not really healthy for us, but usually when you dry out the mushrooms, a lot of it's converted into it's called muscimol. And the muscimol, it works like a neurotransmitter called GABA in our brain. It works with our GABA receptors. And the GABA receptors, they basically, if you have low levels, they're associated with people who have depression, anxiety, sleep disorders. And so the GABA receptors, they're actually associated with the parts of our brain that deal with anxiety, vision, and motor control. Now, the psilocybin, on the other hand, they have a psilocybin in them, and they also have psilocine. And the psilocybin gets converted into psilocine in our body, and this works on our serotonin receptors. So serotonin is a different than GABA, and it's a neurotransmitter that we associate often with like mood, social behavior, appetite, sleep, memory, and our sex desires. And it's also associated with our happiness, well-being, and the reward center. So both of these things, they work like neurotransmitters, and they change how the brain works, and they both work on different receptors. Like, for example, a lot of the antidepressants they prescribe to people are serotonin uptake reinhibitors. And these drugs, they try to increase the amount of serotonin in your brain, but there's a multitude of neurotransmitters, and they really don't know how it's not really fair to say like that just boosting serotonin is going to improve the quality of someone's life. It's like saying you got a problem with your car motor. If you change the tires, it's going to affect, how your pistons work. I don't think that they're necessarily, it's much more complex than that. So
Amanita is legal, but psilocybin isn't?
Correct.
So since Amanitas are legal, should people take them or instead of psilocybin?
I think I don't necessarily know that I want to encourage anybody to do anything because it's a life-changing experience, and I'd hate for someone to blame me. But I think people owe it to themselves to research this, because I think it's the understanding if this is true and if these things can really work to help us and cure us, then it's an amazing thing, and it's great, and everyone should do it. At the same time, there's a negative aspect to these drugs. They don't always work the same way for people, and what brings joy to another person might send you to hell. I mean, there are things called bad trips, and as we do more research, maybe we can find out why people have bad trips. And I know for a fact that they've associated some of it with some of the certain receptors in the brain, and that they can give you a drug before you take this that will counteract all the anxiety. So,
can you describe the experience with Amanitas?
Well, Amanitas are really they're unique in that I've done them multiple times, and I've had multiple types of experiences, and they're not all the same because there's no consistency with Amanitas since they only come from the wild. So unless you get the same Amanitas from the same place, the same time of the year, you don't really know the amount of what's muscimol and all that you're going to get into your system. So, for example, I've eaten them and had absolutely nothing happen. I've eaten them, and I have had a full-blown thing where you start to feel drowsy, you fall asleep. I had the most weird dreams that you can imagine. They were really strange. And then when I woke up from the dreams, I was having like what you'd call an out-of-body experience where I felt like my body was just a machine, and I felt like I was this spirit inside of this machine. It's like, and also I had the experiences of where you look down and you feel like you're 100 feet tall, or you'll look up at something and you'll feel like you're 2 inches small. And that's actually goes back to Alice in Wonderland, which has the mushrooms in there, which Lewis Carroll, actually, interestingly enough, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland, was friends with the guy who was a captain who brought back knowledge of a bunch of people up in the Siberia area who were eating these mushrooms and having these experiences. So, yeah.
Wow. Finish? Or?
Oh, I was going to say Amanitas were not necessarily fun. And again, that's the thing about a lot of these trips is that they're super rewarding, but I liken it to like a major hiking trip where you got a backpack and you're going up a hill and you get to some beautiful place and you get to spend a few days there, and then you got to come back to reality. So it's a trip for sure. And it's something I think people should experience, but only after you do a lot of research and you find out like, a healthy way to incorporate it into your life.
Right. Now we talked a lot about the spiritual aspect, but now there's been a whole microdosing movement with psychedelics. The idea of like giving someone an edge in the workplace by doing this microdosing. What's your opinion on that, and how it's maybe getting away from the spiritual origins of the movement?
Yeah, I think I've done all of this myself, and it's like when I think of like microdosing, to me, it's the equivalent of taking like a super bitchin' cup of coffee. I mean, coffee originally used to give people an edge back in the day because, it was caffeine. There wasn't a lot of other stuff around like that, and it's still today. We consume a lot of caffeine. So I think a lot of these people too, and it's in Silicon Valley. So I think about a lot of these people, using this drug not to become better people, but better employees, better workers. And again, to me, that gets back to this. And there's nothing wrong. I don't want to say there's anything wrong with being a bad employee. That sounds terrible, and I don't want to infer that at all. We all have to work, and it's good to be a good employee. But again, it's like you should be using this stuff, to me, for spiritual growth outside of your workplace, so that when you come back to work, you'll be a better employee because you won't be mad or angry, and you'll be easier to get along with because you'll be more content.
Right. Now, there's this whole decriminalization that's also happening. It's been decriminalized in Denver and Oakland. How will that impact the future of psychedelics?
Well, a lot of this, all this stuff there has been studies and stuff done over the years. People have been getting permission from the government to do studies on this, but it really should open the opportunity up for more research. And people because you got to take a risk right now, and it's something that, again, people will go to jail, and they have gone to jail for growing mushrooms because it's that important to them and they believe in it. But at the same time, it's something that I'd be afraid to grow them because I wouldn't want to get in trouble. It just doesn't seem worth it to me. So if we can decriminalize it and create it as a situation where there can be more research, then we can have businesses, and we can try to which is something I think what I would like to do, is because I believe I've got a lot of ideas I haven't discussed, but I think that a lot of these drugs can effectively be used to not cure depression like a cold, but eradicate it. And it can always come back, but like depression, anxiety, OCD, some of these nervous disorders are basically rooted in a learned conditioned behavior that we think of as learned helplessness. And I really believe that you can eradicate some of these learned helplessness to make people live more fulfilled lives. So
what's next for you in this then? You talked a little bit about it just a second ago. What are you thinking of using this in the future?
Well, I'm trying to organize a company right now. I call it Skydas Labs. And basically what I want to do is I want to conduct research on mushrooms and try to demonstrate how they can cure these mental illnesses. And I think my own experience, there's so much anecdotal evidence that the scientific community doesn't want anecdotal evidence. They want, I guess, real research, which, again, to me, I think anecdotal evidence is just as quantifying as research in a laboratory. But having said that, I would like to have a social laboratory setting where willing participants could come and participate, and we can use some technology out there to figure out what's going on in people's brains when this is taking place. To me, I think one of the wildest ideas that I have is I believe that some of these molecules can actually change your DNA. We have tons of what the scientists call junk DNA. And so if you think of DNA as all of this transcendent, I want to call it knowledge passed on from our ancestors, there's something called epigenetics. And epigenetics is the idea that, you can change your DNA from within. And if you've ever seen like out here where I live, there's lots of oak trees. And on the oak trees get these galls. And the galls are they get infected by a wasp, lays their egg in there, and the tree has this reaction and it creates proteins that are already there, and it creates a new structure that you would never see. There are these star galls that form on the leaves, and then there's these big round ones that form on there. And all of that it's nothing outside of the tree, it's something that comes from within it. And I think there's a lot of things within us that we could really subtly change our DNA through this process. And again, I could prove that or disprove it if I had the technology and access to some equipment, but and that's what I'd like to do, is look on stuff like that.
Well, it's fascinating. Well, this has been an interesting discussion, Chris. I wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you.
Book and also with the Perspective Lab.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.